Hey everybody, I'm Chris Metzler, one of the programmers here at SF Indie Fest. You've just been lucky enough to see this really wonderful doc, and we're lucky to have one directs here, Anna Levin. Anna, welcome, Anna.
Thank you so much. So excited to be here.
Very cool. For those of you, some of you might recognize Anna's face. We're lucky enough to screen one of her earlier docs to providers here a few years ago. So welcome back.
Thank you so much.
Can you tell us a little bit about, I think people often wonder where the ideas for documentaries come from sometimes. So what was the kind of genesis of this film for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So Laura Green, who's the other director, and I have a long-standing interest in telling stories about health and healthcare. As you mentioned, our first film, The Providers, was about rural healthcare. And this film, Matter of Mine, My Parkinson's, is actually part of a trilogy of documentaries that we're working on about people living with neurodegenerative diseases. And so the first film is about ALS, the second film is about Parkinson's, and the third film will be about Alzheimer's. And we really set out to make these films because as the population is aging, we're seeing more and more people grappling with neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's. And more, it's not just the individual who's affected, who has the disease, but their families, their communities. And at the same time, we still know so little about neurodegenerative diseases. And a disease like Parkinson's has some treatments, but it's really been decades since we've seen advances. And so we think it's really important for people to understand what it's like living with Parkinson's, as well as how it impacts the whole family.
Yeah, and there's some just really beautiful and nuanced portraits that kind of you share in the kind of bigger story in the film. Um, how did you wind up, for lack of a better word, casting the the folks whose stories are shared in the film? And was there any kind of like, I could just imagine when you're dealing with some of these difficulties already. I mean, was there any reticence about like having a camera around all the time?
Yes. So I think when most people hear the word Parkinson's, they typically imagine an older white man with Parkinson's. There are several celebrities who've been really outspoken about Parkinson's, which is wonderful and important. But we felt like it was really critical for us to tell the stories of underrepresented people in the media with Parkinson's. And so we really set out to find stories that speak to all different kinds of experiences of living with Parkinson's, which can also really be impacted by where you live, by gender and sex, and by ethnicity and what type of community you're living in. And so we spent about 6 months talking to individuals and their families all around the country who are living with Parkinson's. And we really tried to put together 3 different stories that would give very different perspectives and experiences of living with Parkinson's. It is a very complex illness, and the experiences can really vary. There's not a singular experience of living with Parkinson's. And so we were really fortunate to connect with Peter in Alaska, who's a cartoonist and has been living with the illness for over 20 years. And he has this really amazing longitudinal perspective of what it's been like for him to live with this illness for so long. At the same time, he lives in a community where it's really difficult to access specialized care for Parkinson's. It's a very complex illness, and even a general neurologist has real limitations in terms of treating the illness. And for many people, especially as their illness progresses, it can be really important to see someone that's called a motion disorder specialist who's gone through additional years of training to treat diseases like Parkinson's. At the same time, we also were really interested in pursuing a story about deep brain stimulation surgery, which you see Juan go through in the film, because it can be a very effective treatment that has been around for a few decades, but it's still underutilized, and there's still people who don't know about this treatment option. Um, and then we connected with Veronica, who lives in San Francisco. We really wanted to show a story of someone who was raising a child with Parkinson's disease, because that presents its own challenges, as well as it was important to us to tell the story of a woman with Parkinson's disease, because it can be a very different kind of experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's there's so many kind of layers there. I mean, in making, this film and others like it, I can imagine you get really close to the people whose stories you shared. I mean, you know, how how do you wind up, I guess, navigating that, I guess, when you're, capturing these kind of inspiring but also difficult stories, I guess, just yeah, how do you kind of navigate that of like, you know, being close to the subject matter, but I guess also being able to kind of separate yourself.
Yes, well, in terms of building the relationships with the people in the film, it happens over time. We connect with families and have a number of Zoom conversations with them before we ever begin filming, so that we're able to talk about in depth in about what we envision doing, how we envision this film. And we really want to make sure that the people who are in the film feel good about sharing their stories, feel like it's going to be a positive experience for them. And I think that, each individual in the film, really found meaning in sharing their story, as difficult as it was at times. I think that Parkinson's can be an incredibly isolating disease, a very isolating experience. And what we've heard can be one of the most helpful things is for people with Parkinson's to be able to connect with others with Parkinson's. And so, we hope through this film that people with Parkinson's and their families can feel less isolated.
Yeah, it definitely made me kind of understand the situation and uh, in a bigger way. Were there any things that kind of surprised you during the making of the film that you didn't expect?
Yes, well, I think that, people typically think of Parkinson's disease as tremor, mostly movement related symptoms. And what we learned over the course of making this film is that Parkinson's has such a tremendously wide range of symptoms and impacts you in so many different ways, from, mood disorders, digestive issues, speech, even, what Peter talks about in the film, smell hallucinations. Um, and it really it makes you appreciate your brain in a new way, because you're not really aware of all the different things your brain is doing until things start to go wrong. And that's what happens in Parkinson's disease.
Well, thanks again for making a really terrific documentary. For those that want to kind of either kind of help spread the word about the film or even check out the other two films in the trilogy, how would they go about following your guys' efforts?
Well, you can find us on social media at Matter of Mind Doc. We're on Facebook and Instagram. The first film, Matter of Mind, My ALS, is available to rent on Apple TV and Amazon. And the third film, Matter of Mine, My Alzheimer's, will be coming out in 2025.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for sharing the film, Anna, and being part of SF Indie Fest.
Thank you so much. So excited to be here.
Cool.